Ranu approached me with, putting together some kind of commemoration of Sangam's 60th anniversary, I wanted to bring a historian's gaze to this project. I wanted to make sure that we showcase the scope and scale of MIT's very long engagement with South Asia. We wanted to focus on the early years for this particular project over IAP. And we also wanted to make sure that we highlight MIT's production of knowledge on South Asia that went beyond just engineering to all the different schools at the Institute. And who better to tell this story than current MIT students? So for the past 6 weeks, the MIT students who you'll be hearing from shortly have been part of what I like to call a historian's lab. They've been building an online archive of the material that we have found. And they've also conducted upwards of about 30 oral histories, interviews, with alum that they have chosen themselves. We gave them a little bit of basic training in oral histories, but really the idea was that the students would go out, select the alum that they are interested in, interview them, and then put together an oral history archive as well.
And now I'll be talking a little bit about our early student bios. Keshav Bhatt was the first Indian student at MIT. He came in 1882, where he studied chemistry, and came back again in 1990 to study electricity as well. Bhatt first came to America during the peak of British colonialism, when it was very rare to come overseas for education. He enrolled as a special student, which means that he was also working while taking classes, and that was at a dye works company in Malden, Massachusetts. And there he used his technical skills to become involved with the dyeing industry and also learned canning. And so one fun fact we found was that a reporter mentioned that his canned guava tasted as good as fresh fruit. Despite the fact that some criticized Bhatt for spending so much time and money traveling abroad to be educated, he wrote in the first volume of the MIT Technological Review that he credited MIT for his success and his friendships.
And I'm going to talk about the Kirloskar cousins who went to MIT from 1922 to 1926. So just a little background, the Kirloskar Group is one of the biggest industrial firms in India and one of the biggest engineering conglomerates. So they were the first large business family to send multiple generations of students to MIT. So they started with Madhav and Shantanu. So Madhav went to MIT from 1922 until 1924. He was studying electrical engineering because he wanted to go back home and run the electric motor business. Unfortunately, he passed away of tuberculosis during his senior year, so that was definitely a tragedy for the family. His younger cousin, Shantanu, who was younger by 4 years, was studying for a bachelor in mechanical engineering. Some interesting things about Shantanu, because there was optional military training at MIT at the time, he was a reserve officer in the US Army by the time he graduated. Shantanu went on to expand the Kirloskar Group to the sort of massive firm it is today. So he had a long and wonderful career.
I'm going to talk today about Madan Bagai, who was possibly the first South Asian American student to come to MIT. Bagai immigrated to the US with his family in 1915. In 1923, his family lost US citizenship because of the Supreme Court case US versus Tind. During this time, they had also renounced British citizenship, so by legal definitions, they were stateless. In 1946, with the Luce-Celler Act, the family was finally allowed naturalization in the US. However, before this act, Madan's father unfortunately died by suicide in 1928 because he felt trapped and betrayed by the US government, and because he was distraught about being unable to return home to India. Madan's enrollment at MIT and his family's grappling with immigration, citizenship, grief, and belonging allows us to connect MIT in a deeply personal way to US history and early South Asian diasporic experiences.
One of the things I was doing on this project was going through archives of the Tech, which is the undergraduate student newspaper, as there were two new nations looking towards MIT for inspiration for educational institutes and industrialization. An article from 1949 where the first Prime Minister of independent India, Jawaharlal Nehru, is visiting campus. This sort of partnership is what later led to the formation of institutes like IIT Kanpur and BITS Pilani in India.
Now I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about the South Asian departments and organizations at MIT. First, we start with Sangam, which is the Association of Indian Graduate Students at MIT. It was founded in 1962, and we're actually planning on launching this exhibition for this project in 2022 to celebrate the 60th year anniversary of Sangam. And then we have South Asian Association Students, SAS, which I personally have been involved with. All of these organizations and many others that have not been listed here have allowed and still continue to allow students at MIT to celebrate their South Asian heritage.
Charles Correa is considered India's greatest architect. He actually followed in the footsteps of a lot of early architecture students at MIT from South Asian descent that used their work to contribute to sustainable solutions addressing social issues back in South Asia. He designed the Gandhi Memorial Museum of Ahmedabad in India. He also designed the McGovern Institute at MIT. A lot of his work is surrounding sustainable development through architecture.
A major part of this project was also looking at the oral histories. So I'll start with M.G. Vasanji, who was raised in Tanzania before he came to MIT, where he got a BS in physics in 1974. While at MIT, he actually helped found the MIT African Students Association with a few other Ethiopian, Malawian, and Kenyan students as well. And then he actually published a book called The Gunny Sack, which launched his career as an esteemed writer. And so we were really excited to interview him because of this really cool career switch and the fact that many of his books now relate to the South Asian diaspora.
One of the interviews that I did was with Almitra Patel, who was the first woman from India to graduate from MIT and the first female engineer from South Asia at MIT in general. She grew up in Bombay with an interest in biology, but at her father's request decided to study ceramics at MIT. After her career in ceramics, she retired and turned towards environmental activism and waste management, which is what she's working on to this day. When she told me that being on campus, she decided at one point that if she couldn't fit in, she would just be different. And so, unable to keep up with the changing fashion trends, she would just wear saris to class.
Dr. Natarajan graduated from MIT with a bachelor's in physics and math in 1990 and then a master's in 93. The reason I wanted to interview her was, one, she's a very accomplished theoretical astrophysicist. Two, I was interested in her perspective as a woman of color in the sciences at a time when there were very few women in the sciences at all. Definitely one theme that we kept coming back to was to never stop learning, because even though Dr. Natarajan describes herself as a physics and math nerd, she's always been interested in a variety of things. Her first year off was actually in anthropology, and she briefly considered architecture as a major. So I think that's a really great sort of model for keeping track of everything that's going on in the world.
The interviews that I did that I wanted to highlight was one that I did with George Ruckert, who was the founder of MITHAS at MIT. MITHAS is the MIT Heritage Arts of South Asia, this program that welcomed South Asian artists to MIT. I also got to talk to Arun Dravid, who graduated from MIT in 1968 with a degree in chemical engineering. Throughout his life, he pursued chemical engineering as well as a very professional career in Hindustani classical music. He talked to me about his life being both a musician and an engineer, and I was really interested in the intersection between the two. But he mentioned to me that creativity and music and engineering are basically the same, it's just different toolboxes. And in one, you're creating something that's going to help humanity physically, and when you're creating something that will help humanity spiritually.
This is very much a work in progress. This is just the beginning of what I think is going to be a long and very meaningful and diverse project. So I hope that what you hear and see today will inspire you to get involved.